The king of trash television has been called a menace to society, a purveyor of sleaze, and, far worse, his race to the bottom has made him very popular and very rich. Jerry Springer discovered a formula, how to turn brawls into profits.
You ugly, you ugly, you ugly.
Jerry's show is like the accident that happens on the expressway. But it's one thing when people are stopping and looking at the accident. It's another thing to be manufacturing the accident.
Jerry, as the somewhat detached ringmaster, is able to stay out of the fray and continue to be respected by his viewers.
Hey, it's my show, be quiet.
He was an entertainer from the get-go.
Hi, I'm Jerry Springer, Democratic candidate for governor.
He thought he could be anything.
Take care of yourself.
His commentaries were very good.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thought, all right. Certainly the right and decent way to live.
And people really did say, did you hear what Jerry Springer said last night?
Most Americans of whatever color like the idea that this is not a society that is, quote, racially pure.
He's a cool guy, but he's kind of a little geek, too.
It's a puzzle that doesn't really all fit together.
I liken him to a pinball. He goes out of the gate, and you never know where he's going to land, but if he hits an obstacle, he'll bounce back and hit something else.
Jerry has never really grown up, and that's what I think people relate to. He is a common guy. He doesn't want to be treated like a star. He's Jerry. He's Jerry Springer.
Oh, swish!
I ask you to welcome the man. Would you welcome Mr. Jerry Springer right over there?
Every week, more than 25 million viewers tune in to watch Jerry Springer, ringmaster of television's most outrageous show.
Where in the Bible does it say we're supposed to start shooting each other?
Read Revelation.
But TV star is only his latest incarnation. Just one part of a journey that has taken him from politician to news anchor, talk show host to pop icon. Jerry Springer's life is a classic American success story. The saga of an immigrant son chasing and finding the American dream. The year was 1939. In Berlin, the heart of Nazi Germany, Jewish citizens were under siege from Hitler's SS and Gestapo troops. For the recently married Richard and Margot Springer, the terror was too much. In August of that year, just 2 weeks before Hitler invaded Poland, the Springers said goodbye to their families, left Berlin behind, and fled to London. There, under the nightly barrage of German bombs, they began their own family. Daughter Evelyn was born in 1940, and 4 years later, February 13th, 1944, Gerald Springer arrived amid the acrid smoke and primeval fires of the London Blitz. The Springers eked out a hard living in the ravaged city. Richard peddled stuffed animals in the street, sewed army uniforms, and climbed the rooftops as an air raid warden. But perhaps most difficult for the couple was the news from home. Both of their mothers, as well as Richard's brother Kurt, were exterminated in concentration camps. When the war ended, Jerry's parents were determined to find a safe place to raise their children. And so, in 1949, the Springers stood on the deck of the Queen Mary as the Statue of Liberty passed by. They settled in Kew Gardens, a quiet community in the New York City borough of Queens, home to hundreds of other German-born Jewish refugees like the Springers.
Our apartment house actually was a neighborhood to itself. We had a 6-story building. There must have been 10 apartments on each floor, on each side of the building, so you had a lot of people that lived in a small area. And people got to know each other. They shared in their joys and their sorrows, and we had a real sense of community.
Jerry's sense of security was reinforced by his parents, who helped him adapt to his new life in America. Memories of the Holocaust were never mentioned.
It was too horrible to talk about, of course, especially if they lost their families. It was a new life for them, and I think they chose to, I hate to use the word, assimilate into the society that was here in Kew Gardens and Queens.
Jerry's assimilation didn't get off to a very good start. For his first day of school, his mother dressed him as she had in England, blue shorts, knee socks, jacket, bow tie, and a beret. When the outfit led to taunts and beatings from Jerry's new classmates, Margot tried something she hoped would make him look more like an American.
His mother bought him a Yankees uniform to wear to school, and he wore this Yankees uniform, and all the kids liked him all of a sudden.
Jerry and his sister each soon found a new group of friends. Evelyn was smart and good-looking, and Jerry's warm, outgoing personality made him easy to like.
He was a young man who, one, had a nice confidence about him. He had a confidence in his sense of humor. He had a confidence about doing silly things. He was never one to shy away from an adventure, never one to shy away from trying something new, and I believe he always thought that that was the way life should be lived. Try it, have fun, but don't go back. Just go forward.
Jerry's enthusiastic outlook was encouraged by his parents, who worked hard to provide for their kids. His father supported the family by selling his homemade stuffed animals and eventually grew successful as a toy manufacturer. Margot settled into a clerk's job at a Wall Street bank. The Springers had attained a solid middle-class life. As shown in these rare home movies, Jerry was able to enjoy a typical American childhood. His sense of humor, easy charm, and ability to please won him lots of friends. He joined them at camp and played sports with enthusiasm, even if his skills were sometimes lacking a certain polish. Jerry's parents also made sure he never forgot his responsibilities as an American citizen. The Springers were Stevenson Democrats, and politics played a key role in the family's life.
It was almost logical that you would, be appreciative to what Roosevelt and to what the Democrats had done in terms of bringing immigrants over to America and giving them a shot. I vividly remember watching the political conventions, on a little black and white screen.
But while Jerry's knowledge of politics may have been advanced for a teenager, he and his buddies lacked sophistication in other ways.
Did we hang out with girls? Heaven forbid, no. Did we drink? Don't recall it. Did we smoke dope or do anything like that? Happily, not even the time period yet. Did we smoke cigarettes? Nope. We were losers.
As Jerry's senior year began, he laid plans for college. With no real ambition in mind, he nevertheless looked forward to the experience as the next logical step in his parents' plans.
Richard and Margot did want to give them the American dream because of what they suffered in Europe, but they were determined that their children shouldn't have to suffer. And so college was in the offing and all that would lead to.
In the fall of 1961, it led Jerry Springer to Tulane University in New Orleans. He majored in political science, and his liberal politics soon drew him to the civil rights movement. Jerry rode the buses into Mississippi, where he joined in the fight to win voting rights for black citizens. New Orleans was also Jerry's awakening to the world. He began to venture into the red light district of the French Quarter with his fraternity brothers. The innocent kid from Queens was acquiring an early taste for the ladies of the quarter. Jerry also began to indulge himself in other ways. His growing love for the spotlight led him to act in school plays and to work on the air at the Tulane radio station.
When he came home and mentioned that, I thought to myself, oh, boy, that makes sense. Because Jerry was a talker.
Jerry's talkative charm would not be put to use quite yet. He graduated Tulane in 1965 and entered Northwestern University Law School. He'd never planned to be a lawyer. His growing passion was for politics, but it was part of a time-honored tradition.
That tradition in Jewish families were a lawyer, a doctor, or any of those higher so-called professions was what parents wanted.
I do remember making the decision I didn't want to be a doctor. I just didn't, noblest of all professions, but I just didn't have the stomach for it, whatever. And because I was interested in politics, it seemed like law probably was, the same kind of field, the discussion of issues. That felt probably more comfortable, but it was just assumed I would continue going to school.
Jerry spent time out of the classroom as well. To earn money, he played local clubs in a folk music group called Springer Stringers, joined a fraternity, and enjoyed a carefree student's life. But Jerry's easygoing days came to an end in 1967, when one of his professors introduced him to Robert Kennedy. The young law student quickly grew to idolize the charismatic politician. When Kennedy announced his presidential run in 1968, Jerry left school to campaign for the candidate, a man who represented everything Jerry felt passionately about.
It was a time of idealism. It was a time where public service had nobility, and the thought that we could make the world better was obviously the generational call.
Robert Kennedy's assassination in June of 1968 proved too much for Jerry to bear. He fell into a deep depression and returned to Northwestern for his law degree. But passionate feelings against the Vietnam War called him back into action. Jerry traveled to Chicago, where he joined in a massive anti-war demonstration surrounding the 1968 Democratic Convention. He didn't worry what impact his radical politics might have on a law career. He interned with a conservative blue-chip law firm in Cincinnati, Ohio, but never believed they would hire him for good because of his liberal politics and New York Jewish roots. He returned home to Kew Gardens for the holidays at the end of 1968, uncertain of his future. Within months, everything would change. Jerry Springer was about to achieve political stardom and come close to losing it all in a sex scandal big enough to rob him of his dreams. Jerry Springer was about to graduate from law school as 1968 drew to a close, so he returned home to enjoy the holidays with family and friends. But the sabbatical held a surprise for him. Frost & Jacobs, the prestigious Cincinnati law firm where he had interned, called to offer him a job. And so, in the summer of 1969, Jerry headed for Cincinnati to begin his new career. However, practicing law was not his ambition. Politics was. Almost immediately, he was appointed local leader in a national campaign to lower the voting age to 19. Jerry was invited to speak at many functions, including a Democratic fundraiser just 2 weeks before the election.
Senator Birchby was the main speaker, so they brought me up there, and I gave this, at the time, impassioned plea for why we ought to lower the voting age. That you're sending all these young people off to die in Vietnam. You know, how dare you say they can't even vote on the people who are going to send them there?
This city had not seen anyone quite like Jerry before, somebody who could speak with a great deal of charisma and excite young people, and it was clear that he was a very interesting new arrival in Cincinnati.
Jerry's speech made an impression on the Democratic leaders, who encouraged him to run for office. He took them at their word and began his political career by quitting his job. Still only 25 years old, the minimum allowable age, he announced his candidacy for the Democratic nomination for Congress.
I run because it has become increasingly evident that unless some new alternative, some new initiative, some new approach is injected into the political life of our community, we are destined to lose here at home the very prize we seek to defend abroad, the politics of participation.
Right from the start, Jerry's campaign took off. His politics were firmly rooted in the anti-war movement, and he quickly inspired a loyal group of followers drawn to his message and his passion.
He knew how to draw people around him, almost in JFK style, and looked to me like somebody who had some magic, some political magic.
He was disarming in that what he said you wouldn't predict to come out of that body. And I would say that very early on it was clear that Jerry was driven by the right things.
Despite Jerry's anti-war position, he still had to fulfill some type of military service. He had been in the Army Reserves for several years, and the day after announcing for Congress, he was called to active duty. On November 28, 1969, he reported for basic training at Fort Knox, where his sense of humor quickly made enemies out of the drill sergeants.
They were all over me. You know, they were calling me Private Dickhead. I was the oldest one, because I was 20, now I was 26. And, you know, most of they were still kids. Everyone there was 18. I had already been out practicing law, having a life, and suddenly being called in.
Senator Birch Bayh, who had been impressed by Jerry since his fundraising speech, soon sent word to Fort Knox that young Private Springer was needed in the nation's capital. Jerry was hustled off to Washington, where he testified in support of the constitutional amendment to lower the voting age.
Well, when I went back, now word had spread, you know, that, wow, we better not mess around with senators, and he could be a congressman. So the treatment was a lot better when I got back, you know. Then I was dickhead sir.
The future of Cincinnati will be shaped.
Jerry completed his 6-month tour of duty and returned home in time to finish his primary race. He won the Democratic nomination and came close to beating the heavily favored incumbent in the general election. Jerry wasted no time capitalizing on his popularity. In June of 1970, the liberal Jewish New Yorker announced his run for city council in staunchly conservative Cincinnati.
He was an outsider when he came to this country. He was an outsider growing up in Kew Gardens, and all through his life he's been an outsider. But I've watched him turn that into an incredible strength over his career, mostly in political life, in public life. He was the first professional I can feel your pain guy.
Jerry's empathy with the voters made the difference, and he won the election. On December 1st, 1971, the young anti-war Democrat took his seat on the conservative city council and immediately created controversy.
The very first day, I introduced an ordinance which would make it illegal for Cincinnati residents to serve in undeclared wars, because, of course, we never declared war in Vietnam. And the people went crazy. There were front-page editorials blasting me. You know, how dare I do this? I'm supposed to be on city council dealing with city issues. What's all this about?
Jerry's motion lost, but his popularity grew, and he was re-elected by a wide margin 2 years later. All the while, he was becoming a master at playing the media. He frequently made the 6 o'clock news by staging stunts, even spending the night in jail to push for prisoners' rights.
And they have a bucket there. They have to go to the bathroom. And they have straw mattresses.
But media events and public crusades were not Jerry's only passion. Since 1969, he had been dating Margaret Beltran, a young administrative assistant at Procter & Gamble. Margaret, known to everyone as Mickey, was from Kentucky, a quiet, down-to-earth beauty who shied away from the spotlight Jerry loved. On June 16, 1973, the couple was married. It seemed Jerry Springer had it all. Newly married, exceedingly popular, he was destined for a bright political future. But his good fortune didn't last. In April 1974, everything came crashing down around him. Jerry was about to be exposed as a customer of prostitutes in nearby Kentucky. Vice cops cracking down on the prostitution ring had come across personal checks Jerry had written for the women's services. The popular young councilman was stunned. His secret was sure to be revealed. Jerry faced a difficult decision.
I really thought I'd screwed up my life. I mean, at the time, I'm sure, looking back now, you know, it wouldn't even make the back page of a newspaper anymore. But back then, it seemed, at least to me, pretty big, a pretty big screw-up. And I had to get my own life in order. I wasn't even thinking of, you know, how does it play politically? I just said, whoa.
Jerry decided to meet the scandal head-on. He posted a resignation on the door of his office and announced a press conference for the next day, where he faced reporters and confessed to everything.
I'll never forget it. I mean, it's a hard thing for a person to do, and he did it.
Jerry's political career seemed to be over. He returned to private life, and along with his wife Mickey, set about putting the scandal in the past. But his public disgrace was not forgotten.
The hard thing was, after it was over, he spent a year as a lawyer walking the streets, and everybody was hooting at him all the time, thought it was hilarious. And that toughened him up, I think. It also firmed his resolve.
As Jerry's resolve grew, so did a phenomenon. Cincinnati forgave him, turning his peccadillo into popular folklore rather than a political epitaph. Jerry began to think of a comeback.
And I think as time went on, he got enough feedback from people in the city that he said, I can do this. I have a right to do this. I did the right thing when it happened. I quit. I took my hit. He took a hard hit.
By 1975, Jerry Springer's sexcapade had entered Cincinnati legend. His indiscretion was forgiven by enough voters to convince the former councilman to run again. He campaigned hard and was encouraged to find his scandal was now a source of humor rather than scorn.
And a lot of them would be yelling, "Hey, Springer, are you writing any more checks?" And he would laugh it off and wave to them.
One of his strengths is his humor. But one of his strengths, and probably a more important strength, is the empathy that he can project with people.
It was a quality that enabled Jerry to win. 2 years later, he ran again, and his resounding victory swept him into the mayor's office. To Jerry's family, his selection as mayor was a singular moment. Back home in Kew Gardens, Richard Springer was happily showing friends and neighbors evidence of his son's success.
He showed me the Cincinnati paper with the headlines and his picture, and he said, "My son is the mayor." So it's like a Jewish thing, my son the lawyer, my son the mayor, and he was really excited about it.
Jerry was about to discover for himself the joys of being a parent. In July of 1976, just before his inauguration as Cincinnati's youngest ever mayor, Mickey gave birth to the couple's first child, Katie. But the couple soon discovered that their daughter had been born legally blind, deaf in one ear, and without nasal passages. Surgeons fixed her breathing, but little else could be done. Jerry and Mickey took their daughter home.
Jerry was not around City Hall for a while, and the day he came back, I talked with him, and it was the most subdued that I'd ever seen him.
Jerry did his best to take care of Katie on his low civil servant salary, and Cincinnati soon benefited from its new mayor. He created health clinics in poor neighborhoods and helped settle a bitter transit strike. But Jerry began to crave a bigger stage. In the next few years, he would make a run at the state's highest office and begin a whole new career, one destined to put him in the spotlight forever. By 1981, Jerry Springer had served Cincinnati as a popular council member and mayor for almost a decade. His future appeared bright, and his driving ambition remained strong. And so, that December, he resigned from city government to make a run in the Democratic primary for governor.
I'm up at 5:30, and I'm never back in the hotel till midnight or 1. So I'm living on 4.5 hours sleep every day, and you're always on.
Jerry crisscrossed Ohio, hoping his magic would strike again. As Election Day grew nearer, it became clear it would not. So, in a move that made headlines around the country, Jerry and Mike Ford put together a commercial they hoped would make the difference, revealing Jerry's old prostitution scandal.
Some 9 years ago, I spent time with a woman I shouldn't have, and I paid her with a check. I wish I hadn't done that.
He needs to tell the truth to people, otherwise he's uncomfortable, and they can read that. But number two is that we knew the issue was being raised.
But the commercial didn't work. Jerry placed third in the primary. Late that summer, he announced he was retiring from politics. Only his closest friends and supporters understood the reason this political junkie chose to retire.
We had been doing this at that point for almost 15 years, and we were all poor. We had no money. Nobody did. And Jerry had a family at the time, and it was time to take care of that business.
Jerry's need for money was solved immediately. He received calls from all 3 network affiliates in Cincinnati. They wanted to know if he would be interested in work as a political commentator.
So I said yes. I decided to go with the NBC affiliate because they were last in the ratings. You know, maybe I could be helpful, or maybe I could learn. At least while I was learning, no one would be watching.
And so on November 2nd, 1982, Jerry made his television debut in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ironically, his first interview was with Governor-elect Richard Celeste, the man who won the very job Jerry had fought so hard to get. At first, Jerry's desire to be a good television reporter far outweighed his ability. But the lack of polish didn't bother his viewers. They simply wanted Jerry to be Jerry.
Jerry had been a councilman. He had been a mayor. He had gone through what most people couldn't survive, a disgrace. He'd lost a bid for governor. People knew Jerry like they knew their brother or sister. I mean, Jerry was just one of the gang.
Just 2 years after his debut, Jerry was named co-anchor of the news, but not before WLWT put him through some serious training.
Now, they had to send him to anchor school because he still had a New York accent, and he didn't talk correctly, and he went away and came back able to talk a whole new language. Nebraskan, I think, was the language.
All tonight's news from the Action 5 News team.
I white-knuckled for about a year with him, hoping that he could finish out the sentence before the teleprompter went down. The story that is infamous here at Channel 5 is his commentary on Elvis.
Back then, they were putting the sheets into the prompter one at a time.
He's not here, of course, to celebrate his 50th birthday.
The sheets were in the wrong order, and halfway through, I realized what I was saying was nonsense.
He wouldn't have been if no one had the chance to see that.
In fact, there were sheets that wasn't about Elvis at all.
And he just starts stringing extraneous words together.
Our defiance, our youth, our naivety, and our vulnerability.
And then I saw a hand going into the prompter, and then I saw the page going in upside down.
And I remember him saying something like,
what we remember most about Elvis is not the fact that he died, but we are reminded about the fact of when he was young and when he was young.
And finally, I just gave up and I said, Norma?
They popped me back up on camera, and I have to go, thank you, Jerry, like I knew what he meant. And I wanted to go, huh?
I was terrible. Why they kept me after that is they're still kicking themselves.
But WLWT kept Jerry on, and together with Norma Rashid, he took the newscast to #1. By 1987, the 43-year-old newsman was regularly being named Best TV Anchor in Cincinnati.
So, as I thank you tonight for the Best Anchor honor, as well as for accepting me in this dual role, I also must thank my bosses. First, because they deserve it. Second, because they may be watching. And thirdly,
Jerry enjoyed his local celebrity, turning up at golf tournaments, sporting events, and even performing country music for fun. But just as his success was cresting, he was shaken by tragedy and heartbreak. His mother, Margot, died 3 weeks before her 79th birthday. And in March of 1986, Richard Springer died at 81. The parents who had worked so hard to give him the dreams he realized died within 7 months of each other. And by 1989, Jerry's marriage to Mickey had unraveled. The couple separated, but stayed united in their love and caring for daughter Katie.
I think Jerry's very much a family man when it comes to his daughter. He's devoted to Katie. She is a wonderfully brilliant child, apple of her dad's eye, and I think the softest part of his heart is with her.
Katie had learned to overcome her early disabilities, aided by her father's constant devotion. Jerry continued to pour his heart into work as well. He won 10 Emmy Awards for his work at WLWT, and his bosses took notice. In 1991, they gave their popular newsman a new assignment, talk show host. In just a few short years, the Jerry Springer Show would become the most talked about hour on television.
We'll be right back.
Biography.
In 1991, Jerry Springer took on a new job as host of his own talk show. Phil Donahue, whose program was owned by Jerry's parent company, was nearing the end of his run. In Springer, executives thought they had the new king of daytime talk. And so, in September of 1991, the Jerry Springer Show went on the air from Cincinnati as a toned-down duplicate of the Phil Donahue Show.
He wasn't doing anything that might be controversial or outrageous. He was taking the makeover day formula or the kids in trouble topic.
If you just joined us, we're talking about spoiling our kids rotten. Yes.
It never really took off. It never was exciting. I hate to say it was dull, but it probably was.
Within a year, the show was picked up by enough stations to be renewed. There was one hitch. Jerry and the show were moving to the WMAQ studios in Chicago, headquarters for the syndication company that now handled the show.
5, 4 to applause, 3.
For Jerry, it meant a daily commute between his news job in Cincinnati and talk show in Chicago.
It was awful because I'd get up in the morning, fly to Chicago, tape the show here, and then in the afternoon, fly back to Cincinnati to do the news that evening, and trying to do that 4 or 5 days a week. It became too much, and the truth is both jobs were suffering.
Jerry staked his future on being a talk show host. In 1993, he left Cincinnati and his news job behind and moved to Chicago.
Would you welcome Mr. Jerry Springer right over there?
But despite his new focus, the talk show was slipping in the ratings.
But what the court said,
In 1994, original executive producer Bert Dubrow was replaced by show producer Richard Dominick, who had once worked for the supermarket tabloids. He had his own ideas for making Jerry a success.
Wait a second. Wait a second.
I always felt that if we could do a talk show using Jerry's personality, instead of trying to mold him into something he wasn't, we would have a guy who would become a star.
Dominick took over just after an unexpected element began to emerge.
One more time. You will have.
At first, Jerry claimed the impromptu violence on his show was unacceptable.
Everybody sit down. Down.
We are back, and let me first apologize for the disruption at the end of the show. It is not, I don't want to be a part of anything which brings violence into anybody's home.
However, Jerry couldn't deny the positive effect on his ratings. The show was beginning to catch on. To really succeed, it needed to exploit its unusual content and Jerry's emerging persona. Jerry and Richard Dominick decided to aim their show at a new, untapped audience.
So we decided that we were going to go after what I like to call the Letterman crowd, because there was nobody doing a show for college kids.
You ain't nothing but punk kid. Come on then, show me what a punk kid I am.
It doesn't...
The first thing we did is we made the show very sexy. We called the producers in here and we said, it has to be interesting with the sound off, because nobody was watching us. Nobody knew who Jerry Springer was. So the first thing we did is we put his name up on the screen for the whole show. So if you hit it at any moment, you would know who you were watching.
Whoa, no, baby, I ain't running no, without.
Hey, it's my show. Be quiet.
Putting Jerry's name on the screen over fighting guests was not the whole answer. Soon, he and his staff figured out the one ingredient their target audience of college kids wanted.
I have another lover.
Sex. Sex and more sex.
It's about to rain.
Yes. We started to think about our show as a fraternity party. On a Friday night fraternity party, what do the guys talk about? They're talking about, you know, or the girls talk about. They're talking about who they're dating, who dumped whom, who's doing what with what, you know. And then it just started to get silly, and it got sillier and crazier, and it took off on its own and just evolved. Once you go young, you're going to go crazy.
Almost immediately, Jerry's ratings took off. The formula of sex and violence was working. And just as quickly, he and his producers began to rationalize the fight.
Well, what's better? Let them take a tire iron and go over to the smashed car windows at midnight, or go on a Jerry Springer show and let it all out?
The wild fisticuffs and outrageous guests were bringing Jerry lots of attention as 1995 began. But with success came controversy. Stories began to surface that some of his guests were not who they claimed to be. Viewers and critics also thought the fights looked staged.
The Jerry Springer Show can certainly be compared to pro wrestling or the upcoming revival of roller derby. It's a rowdy, raucous form of entertainment that's been around for a long time.
The former mayor with a penchant for stunts The anchorman who sang country music was being accused of a scam. But Jerry had always been an entertainer. The showman in him was simply taking over.
This show is for the public, for a segment of the public that likes this.
I have another lover.
Who is this somebody else?
Dale's Aunt Sharon.
When I tell him, well, Jerry, I don't watch your show, he goes, I don't watch it either. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be friends with anybody who watched my show.
People were watching, though, and in ever-increasing numbers. Soon, Jerry Springer would rise to become the king of daytime talk. And in the process, become one of the most outrageous, controversial men on television. By 1996, Jerry Springer was the host of America's most controversial daytime talk show.
Yes?
Riding a wave of publicity generated by his daily dose of sex and violence.
He's a woman beater.
To his fans, Jerry was the hip ringmaster of a hot show.
But I used to be a man at one time.
But to his friends, many of them the same people he had always known, he remained the same old Jerry, relaxed, confident, taking it all in stride. Outwardly, he lived the carefree bachelor's life. Privately, people close to Jerry alleged that he and his estranged wife, Mickey, were living together again. Jerry took care to keep his public and personal lives separate and distinct. But the public Jerry was increasingly under fire. A group of critics, led by Senator Joseph Lieberman and former Education Secretary William Bennett, launched a media campaign against Jerry and his brand of trash TV. And the Chicago coalition led by Reverend Michael Flegger soon joined the assaults.
You better feel responsible because you've been...
We are saying in his show that when you get mad with somebody, when you disagree with somebody, when I'm angry with somebody, normal behavior is to pick up a chair or pull their hair or slap them in the face. When you do that day after day after day, and that is the normal response, you're saying to America, particularly the young people who they target that show toward, this is normal behavior. That's not normal behavior. Violence is not normal behavior.
Jerry defended himself, saying people who watched his show were tuning in for entertainment, and they were doing so willingly. To him, it was simply a matter of free choice.
It's silly. It's chewing gum. It's sometimes stupid, but who cares? You know, that's why God gave us remote control. You don't like the show? Don't watch it.
Next week we start getting paid.
Jerry had a loyal audience. In fact, it had grown by a staggering 70% in just 3 years.
Hey, how you doing, Wade?
By 1997, he was consistently in the top 5. For the first time in his life, Jerry was becoming a household name.
Oh, swish, swish, swish.
He's a cool guy, but he's kind of a little geek, too. So, you know, it's a little balancing act there, you know. But I think people like, Jerry's like the uncle, like he says. He's like the friendly uncle that everybody likes.
And the man the public knew as the king of sleaze had another side. He could be tender, almost sentimental, especially when it came to his daughter, Katie.
When she turned 13, she had her bat mitzvah, and he's sniveling like any mother at a wedding would snivel, crying because he's so touched by the moment. And I think Jerry's a very emotional guy.
However, not everybody understood Jerry. He had endured the venom of pundits and politicians. Now a colleague was joining the attack. In late April 1997, executives at WMAQ decided to add Jerry to their newscast as a commentator, certain he could deliver high ratings. Carol Marie, WMAQ's long-standing co-anchor, launched a campaign to keep Jerry off the air. She claimed Jerry's trashy image threatened her journalistic integrity as well as the newscast. She threatened to resign over Jerry's commentary. Management refused to back down. On May 1st, Maureen quit. For the first time in his career, the unflappable TV veteran was shaken. When the controversy became a national event, Jerry quit the newscast after only 2 broadcasts.
I think he was probably hurt. I think at that point, Jerry started to see that maybe he couldn't be all the things he wanted to be all at the same time. He couldn't be credible journalist. He couldn't be flamboyant talk show host. He couldn't be Jerry Springer, the guy that sings country music. He couldn't, you know, be on The Simpsons. he realized that there are limitations if you take a certain path.
Jerry's new image began to pay huge dividends. By early spring of 1998, he was beating daytime queen Oprah Winfrey, claiming the #1 spot for 25 weeks in a row.
Oh! You think Oprah can do this?
Jerry's show was being seen in 40 countries by more than 25 million viewers every week. A resounding success, due in equal parts to its outrageous behavior and Jerry's seemingly calm voice of reason.
Jerry, as the somewhat detached ringmaster, is able to stay out of the fray and continue to be respected by his viewers because he's not really like the guests, and I think viewers understand this.
Jerry's white-hot celebrity came with a price. In May of 1998, a London tabloid, News of the World, claimed to have X-rated videotape from a hidden camera showing Jerry having sex with hardcore porn actress Kendra Jade and her stepmother in a hotel room. The paper published stills from the video, and an American tabloid, The Globe, paid big bucks for the video rights. Jerry reportedly answered by hiring lots of lawyers who suppressed distribution of the tape. Newspapers reported that when Mickey received photographs of the tryst in the mail, she told Jerry to get lost. The future of the couple's marriage remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Whatever troubles Jerry may have had, they continued to fuel the media frenzy surrounding him and his show.
Why don't you be host tomorrow? I'll be producer.
Give Jerry Springer and the people who make his show some credit for showmanship. They are giving the public what it wants.
To satisfy the demand, home videos featuring scenes too hot for TV were released to unprecedented success. In November of 1998, Jerry's autobiography, Ringmaster, hit the bookstores.
What you doing with my daughter that you ain't doing with me?
And a movie about a talk show host named Jerry, also called Ringmaster, opened on Thanksgiving.
Save it for the show, okay?
Jerry Springer, the son of immigrants who risked everything for freedom and success, continues to fulfill his parents' dream. His path has taken him from London to America, a law office to City Hall, and from newsman to television star.
I've been blessed, you know. I have more good fortune than anybody, particularly me, deserves, so thank you, God, and I just love it.
How do you do, sir? How do you do?
He has proven that in America you can become anything you want if you go out and do it.
I spent time with a woman I shouldn't have.
He's fearless about things that other people would be ashamed of or afraid of.
The president of the local...
He doesn't seem to worry that all the pieces don't fit together.
This is what's making him popular and famous, and Jerry's always had a shtick, and he'll carry this one out until the next shtick comes along.
I got carried away. I just wanted to be one of the guys.
This summer, Jerry Springer hinted that he might run for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat from Ohio. Minority Leader Tom Daschle called him a joke, and Springer eventually decided against the idea, at least for now. His talk show has far fewer fights these days and a smaller audience. Ratings are down 30% from a year ago. His producers now plan to turn the show into a forum for some bizarre characters, such as singing Siamese twins and a man who gained 600 pounds after winning the lottery. Springer says he wants to give his viewers something they can't find anywhere else except perhaps the circus. Tomorrow, Roseanne. She conquered prime time with her comedy, then entered the daytime wars with her own talk show. She's now fighting to keep her program alive. Roseanne on Thursday. And a reminder.
But this Jerry Springer used to be this Jerry Springer. He was an idealistic 1960s liberal activist. At age 25, he ran for Congress.
To see the America we have the right to expect, and the America we have the duty to see.
He became a city councilman in Cincinnati, then was elected mayor. After 2 terms, he ran for governor and lost. His first TV job was behind a news desk, and his talk show originally included guests like Jesse Jackson. Then Jerry decided to appeal to younger viewers. The success that followed made his name a two-word synonym for sleaze.